Insurgency began as a multiplayer total conversion mod on the Source engine back in 2002. It was originally titled Operation: Counter-Insurgency by its creator Andrew Spurrin. The original idea was inspired by his time in the Canadian Army and intended to provide more realism than the games he was playing at the time. Jeremy Blum, founder of the Red Orchestra mod, joined the development team in 2007, and the title was changed to the much simpler Insurgency, or INS. Fast forward a few years to 2012, when the newly formed development studio New World Interactive, also formed by Jeremy Blum, announced a sequel to the mod to be released as a full game. Though originally announced as Insurgency 2, it was released to Steam's Early Access in 2013 as Insurgency, with the full official game launch on January 22, 2014. Insurgency could be placed in a loose category with military simulators such as Arma 3, the Operation Flashpoint series, and America's Army. However, I wouldn't call it a military sim, and though the original idea of the mod was to create an experience that was more realistic than its contemporaries, I wouldn't say that that is the intent of the full game. It does still provide a sense of realism, by which I mean it's trying to give the feeling of being real more than it's actually trying to be a true depiction of the reality of combat. I won't go into a detailed discussion of aesthetics here, but I felt it was important to highlight the distinction due to the inevitable comment of, "This game isn't realistic, it has a respawn." On the surface, Insurgency sounds pretty similar to another former mod turned full game, Counter-Strike. You have a good guy team and a bad guy team, each with unique weapons and conflicting objectives. There are several game modes that are very similar. For instance, Ambush is pretty much identical to any game with a similar game mode. One team escorts the MVP, called the high-value target here, to an area, and the other team tries to kill him. Pretty straightforward. There are 9 multiplayer game modes, most of which involve holding territories in a similar manner to games like Battlefield, blowing up MacGuffins called weapon caches, or escorting the MVP, or high-value target. There are 12 different maps, with a Middle Eastern setting, but with a good range of visual styles and urban to open environments. The maps play quite a bit differently depending on the game mode, and this allows for more variation game to game. Memorizing the maps is helpful, but won't cause you to win every match, because specific locations and sightlines play out differently depending on the game mode. The majority of the maps are balanced well and work easily with different game modes with a few exceptions. Though I found this helpful for initially getting used to the layout of the maps, it can also be a source of frustration because calling out "Get to A" won't mean the same thing on different game modes. You're also forced to use only certain parts of the maps for some game modes, which mostly keeps combat flowing, but can be a headache when you accidentally enter a restricted area and are forced to turn around, run to another area, or be penalized. This has led to more than one unnecessary death, as I didn't know that I was about to enter an area I shouldn't have been in, and attempting to leave it can often get you shot pretty quickly. The basic movement mechanics here are similar to most PC-based FPS games, with the WASD and the mouse being your primary movement and aiming controls. Insurgency has sprinting, crouching, peeking corners, crawling, and sliding. These are nothing unique to Insurgency, but I appreciate the effect they have on combat and the attention to details that has gone into their design. Each of these actions has an effect on your accuracy, as well as the speed at which you can raise your weapon to fire. Crawling may allow you to avoid being spotted and get into good sniper positions, but you can't fire while crawling. There's a slight delay before you can aim once you stop, and you're significantly slower at turning around to face enemies that may be behind you. Sprinting may get you to your destination faster, but you can't fire while sprinting, and there's a delay before you can aim here as well. Sliding into cover can save you from a sniper's bullet, but it won't do much for an enemy that's waiting there for you. There's no sprinting energy bar or anything, but sprinting for longer periods of time, or frequently, causes you to lose breath and affects your accuracy for a cooldown period afterward. These small delays and animations don't have a large immediate effect, but start to really matter in situations where you need to respond quickly. A player walking around a corner will be able to fire half a second faster than one sprinting around a corner. These seemingly small things are where Insurgency really shines for me. They extend into visual and audio mechanics as well. Saw an enemy duck behind some cover? Laying down some suppressive fire has an actual effect here. When bullets land near you, your vision becomes slightly blurred as if you're being disoriented. This effect makes you far less likely to poke your head up and take a few shots yourself, and if you do, you'll be horribly inaccurate. This is such a part of the game that it actually records your enemies suppressed as an end-game statistic, just like enemies killed. Insurgency has little in the way of a heads-up display, instead focusing on other forms of visual feedback. There isn't a health bar, static crosshair, or active ammo count. And instead of seeing what's in your current clip, you will briefly see how many clips you have left when reloading. You can also customize some weapons to fire visible tracer rounds when your active clip is low. Though there isn't a health bar, you can take damage without dying, depending on the strength of what you're hit with, the location on your character's body, and how much armor you're wearing. There's also a visible indicator on screen indicating the direction you are being hit from, which allows you to turn in that direction provided you aren't already dead. Sound is also crucial, as being able to hear where someone is firing at you from will really help. Feedback confirming kills varies depending on the server that you're connected to. By default, you can't see your kill to death ratio while alive in-game, and there isn't a kill feed to tell you if you've actually finished off your target. You must rely on seeing or hearing someone go down to know for sure. I personally enjoy this aspect as I feel it adds to the realism factor and creates a tension when you don't know for sure if you've finished off someone unless you can actually see their dead body. However, this may not be for everyone, and each server can decide if they want to show a kill feed, kill to death ratio while living, or dead players on the score screen. Both the quick play feature and server browser allow you to filter by these options when searching for a server to join. The shooter part of first-person shooter is handled really well here too. Like I mentioned before, Insurgency doesn't have a constant crosshair, but has iron sights that you can aim down. Different weapons behave different ways with this, and scopes obviously have a large effect here. When aiming down your sights, you'll move slower while being far more accurate. This is where another nice little gameplay mechanic comes in. You can control your breathing to focus in. Pressing a key to hold your breath allows you to steady your aim and focus a bit more. While doing this, background noises diminish as you're concentrating fully on the shot.
He's not peeking it anymore. Oh, there's somebody new.
Obviously, this is most immediately useful for snipers, but it can be used with most weapons anytime you're motionless, looking down the sights, or through the scope. Using this method, you can hit targets farther away than normal, even with some weapons that are normally less accurate at longer ranges. Of course, this doesn't trump the mechanics of the individual weapons. What guns you've picked and what accessories you've selected have the largest impact on your accuracy, firing speed, stopping power, and effective range. Weapons and accessories are purchased before spawn, or rather selected, using a simple point-based system. This is less complex than the purchasing system in Counter-Strike, but provides a healthy amount of customization options without overwhelming you. Unfortunately, you aren't able to save your selections, but I'll talk more about that annoyance later. It's also not reward-based for the most part. In other words, you don't start with fewer points and earn more the better you play. Depending on what class you select before spawning, you'll have a different selection of weapons to choose from, and your role in the team should vary. I say should vary because there's very little beyond your own discipline that's keeping you from doing whatever you want as any class you pick. Sure, you may not have access to a heavy machine gun as a sniper, but you could select and customize an assault rifle and take the role of the rifleman class. This isn't an entirely negative thing, as it allows a good team to adapt to the changing battle, but it also allows unorganized or bad teams more freedom to make mistakes or intentionally grief each other. Each team is divided into 2 squads, and each squad only communicates across the whole map with members of their own squad. This promotes closer teamwork as you don't have the channel clogged with the entire team's communication. You can hear teammates on the other squad if they're close enough to you in-game. In fact, the proximity mechanic works regardless of what team you're on. If you're close enough to an opponent, you'll hear their voice communication. This can lead to some terrifically tense moments where you might hear an enemy player say that they're about to throw a grenade or attempt to clear the room you're in. I've given myself away more than once by alerting my teammates to my location while accidentally letting the guy around the corner know I was coming. Though it's possible to mess situations up this way, voice communication is very important for teamwork here. If one team is working together and communicating well, they will almost always win over a team that's not communicating. The sense of teamwork is one of my favorite things about this game. If you're pinned down by an enemy, you're just laying down a bunch of suppressive fire on you, there's often little you can do unless a teammate comes to your rescue. This tends to lead towards triumphant shared moments of victory over the evil nemesis, but it can also lead to frustration if you find yourself playing with people who just aren't interested in being a team. As with any team-based game, the team is only as good as its players. Insurgency is mainly team versus team multiplayer, but it also has a cooperative mode where a smaller team of players can play through alternate versions of the maps against bots. In general, this is a bit more casual than fighting other players, although the difficulty of the bots can be adjusted to make it much more intense. This mode reminds me a lot of the Terrorist Hunt game mode in Rainbow Six Vegas and Rainbow Six Vegas 2. You spawn into a map by yourself or with a few teammates, and have to clear out all of the enemies that are there. I absolutely loved Terrorist Hunt, and it kept me playing RSV2 long after I beat the campaign and got bored of the competitive multiplayer. The bot AI here isn't revolutionary, but it works well most of the time. I appreciate that bots try to flank your position from time to time, but a lot of their actions seem to be map-specific triggers or simply just spawning in an area you'd already been in. If you want to get better at movement and various weapons, this mode can be a great place to hone your skills before going up against human opponents. It's also a blast to get a few friends together and try to beat some of the harder difficulties. We've talked about what Insurgency is, and a lot about what I like, so now it's time to talk about the negatives. At a certain distance from the player, objects stop rendering. This is a normal occurrence for any 3D game, but in Insurgency, this can be gamed or exploited to the player's advantage. If a player is hiding behind a model that isn't part of the terrain, you can zoom in on them and, depending on the distance you are away, see through the object. I haven't encountered a ton of gameplay breaking exploits like this, but even one will really hurt serious competitive play. Even though I haven't seen a ton of exploits, I've encountered a lot of general game bugs and glitches. In fact, the tutorial for the game actually crashed when I killed the final enemy with a grenade I'd thrown after I died, and I quote-unquote won the tutorial as it tried to restart. That crashed me straight to desktop. Though that was the funniest crash I've seen, it's far from the only one, and this isn't a beta or an alpha release, so that's a bit concerning. I really enjoy how the weapon selection and customization work in Insurgency, but not having the ability to save any preset customizations means that even if I know exactly what loadout I want to use for a specific class, I have to set it back every match. Even remembering the previous customization you used for a specific class would go a long way to preventing this headache. I'm not sure exactly how this can be resolved, because each server can change the amount of points you can allocate and restrict or allow some different customizations. It's still super annoying. No matter how you fix it, it's a big problem. So before I'm done here, let's pack a goodie bag for you to take home from this party. The good: well thought out and polished movement and weapon mechanics, good voice communication system and sound design, plenty of game modes including a fun co-op, enjoyable maps with enough variation to keep from being tedious. The bad: balancing issues on specific maps and game modes, restricted areas aren't visually defined in-game, which causes a lot of confusion. More more exploits and bugs than I'd expect from a full game. It's also missing the ability to save your loadouts or your customizations for different weapons. So now it comes time to give a rating for this game. I believe I'm going to rate it on a 5-point scale, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And I will put up something on the screen here to show what the different ratings could mean, and I will try and keep this consistent in future reviews that I do. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the video game Insurgency. Subscribe for more content like this, or whatever I happen to be making at the time. Toodles.